Hello, today we're going to be reading some Stephen Houlgate on Hegel, the phenomenology, the sense certainty section. And this is from Stephen Houlgate's Guide to the Phenomenology. So chapter 3. The phenomenology is meant to show how the experience of consciousness takes it from the standpoint of sense certainty to that of absolute knowing. Hegel understood this development to be driven forward by the logic that is inherent in the experience of consciousness. In what follows, I have concentrated on trying to make this logic as clear as possible. I have thus said very little, indeed almost nothing, about the historical phenomena that correspond to the various shapes of consciousness that emerge. I hope, however, that my approach will help readers of the phenomenology understand why Hegel thought the development he describes is necessary. They will then be in a position to assess for themselves whether the phenomenology succeeds in fulfilling the specific task Hegel set for it. Sense certainty, in Hegel's view, is natural consciousness in its simplest and most immediate form. It takes its object to be here before it, there before it, immediately, and thinks that nothing of the object is hidden from view. It believes that it has before it the sheer being of unalloyed immediacy of the thing. It takes itself in turn to know such immediately. It does not know its object by means of concepts, but takes itself to be directly acquainted with it. Sense certainty, Hegel writes, is, quote, immediate knowledge itself, a knowledge of the immediacy, or what simply is. So it's not comprehension, it's just apprehension. Such certainty is sense certainty, because it takes its object to be immediately given to the senses in space and time. It sees and hears many different things. Indeed, it confronts an infinite wealth of which no bounds can be found. But it takes each thing to be given to it here and now in its immediacy. Accordingly, sense certainty always has something quite specific in view. It sees this night, this day, this house, or this tree, yet it does not identify its object explicitly as a house, rather than a tree, for to do so would be understand it by means of a contrast with something else, and the object would thus not be known immediately. Sense certainty sees this house, and it is aware it is not this tree, but it does not focus on the difference between the two things. It attends directly to the immediacy of the thing before it. It does not say this is a house, not a tree, or even merely this is a house. All that it says about what it knows is just that it is, and its truth contains nothing but the sheer being of the thing. Indeed, sense certainty not only says no more than this, but also has in mind no more than this. Such immediate consciousness of the specific is something we are familiar with in our everyday experience. We share in it whenever we say or think we are conscious of this. In ordinary usage, the word or thought "this" is meant to focus the mind on a specific individual, as in, look at this, but it is meant to do so directly, without the inference of meditating concepts or descriptions. Sense certainty, which aims to be immediate consciousness of the specific, thus necessarily thinks to its object as simply this. More precisely, since it takes its object to be given in space and time, it thinks of it as this here and this now. Furthermore, such certainty takes itself to be no more than this immediate consciousness, or this I. It takes itself to be specific individual, one I among many, but it does not differentiate itself explicitly from other I's by giving itself a name. It thinks of itself simply as this I, that is immediate, aware of this object. In Hegel's own words, consciousness is I, nothing more than pure this. The individual consciousness knows a pure this, or the individual. In the introduction to the phenomenology, Hegel writes that in what consciousness affirms from within itself as being in itself, or the true, we have the standard which consciousness itself sets up by which to measure what it knows. We can now see clearly what sense certainty affirms as the true, what it first takes to its object to be. That object is not the play of forces or the world of spirit, but simply this here now, in its immediacy, specificity, and uniqueness. The task of phenomenology is to trace the experience that is generated by this object and to discover whether this object is preserved in the experience of it. In the science of logic, Hegel maintains that there is nothing in heaven or in nature or mind or anywhere else which does not equally contain both immediacy and mediation. Yet unlike, for example, Adorno, Hegel does not draw on his philosophical insight in order to challenge the idea that one can immediately aware of the immediacy of what is before one. Phenomenology, in Hegel's view, must set all philosophical convictions to one side and undertake an immanent examination of the experience undergone by sense certainty. It must seek to discover, therefore, which such certainty is led by its own conviction, that it beholds the immediacy of this specific thing. At the start of his examination of sense certainty, Hegel proposes a simple experiment. He asks sense certainty what it is aware of. What is the this? Or more precisely, what is the now? To this question, Hegel says we ourselves answer, for example, now is night. We have to give this answer on behalf of sense certainty because it does not identify its object as the night, but takes it simply to be this now. We then write down this truth and keep it until it's daytime. We then look at it again and see that it is no longer true, since it is now no longer true but day, no longer night but day. We are forced to conclude, therefore, that this truth has become stale, shall. This experiment seems curious, since it does not initially appear to demonstrate anything that sense certainty would find problematic. After all, sense certainty never claimed that it would be true to say it is night during the day. It becomes clear from 96, however, that Hegel's real aim is to show not just that what was written down becomes stale over time, but that as night gives way to day, sense certainty actually remains conscious of the very same thing. Sense certainty is conscious of this now without further qualification. It sees the night and thinks it has this in mind in all its specificity, but it does not further identify its object as the night to itself or anyone else. All it has explicitly in mind is the thought, this is now before me. This means, therefore, that it is explicitly conscious not of its object being the night as opposed to the day, but simply of its objects being now before it. This consciousness, however, remains as night gives way to day, for in the day, just as at night, sense certainty is conscious of its object being now before it. Indeed, this remains the case, whatever sense certainty encounters. What sense certainty is explicitly conscious of, therefore, proves to be wholly universal. It is, of course, not meant to be universal, because in being conscious of this now, sense certainty thinks it has in view the unique specificity of thing. Through the simple passage of time, however, sense certainty learns that it has nothing specific in view after all, but something quite determinate and universal. The being this now before me that can belong to anything. The result of Hegel's analysis is not, by the way, that we can never be conscious of specific things. Hegel's claim, in the words of Robert Stern, is that nothing we can know about the object is unique to it, if we stick just to sense certainty. The specificity of things eludes sense certainty because it refuses to identify them explicitly, but thinks of each purely as this here now. And it does that because it thinks that in doing so, it will have in view the undiluted immediacy of the thing. Sense certainty's concern for immediacy is thus what cosigns it to utter indeterminacy. In 1839, so language or time, we'll finish up on this. Let me see. So we have language or time. Let me see. The dialectic of the eye. Let me read actually instead so we have the first experience of the sense certainty. Let me see. The first experience of the sense certainty is the now. Okay. I'm going to skip the concern by Feuerbach. I'm just going to read this second part here, the dialectic of the I. In the experience of sense certainty, as we have seen, the object of such certainty, this here now, comes to diverge from what it is initially taken to be. At this point, Hegel notes, we can compare the former with the latter. Such a comparison could not be undertaken at the outset, but becomes possible through the experience of sense certainty. We now see, therefore, that the universal which the object has come to be is no longer what the object was supposed initially to be for sense certainty. Sense certainty sees this too, and its awareness of this disparity drives it back into itself. It knows that its object is not meant to be indeterminate and universal, but something wholly specific. It now looks to itself and therefore to preserve its consciousness of the specific in face of its experience. Accordingly, sense certainty now claims that it is conscious of something specific, not because of its object is simple and immediate, but because its own certainty is immediate. For sense certainty, the specific and immediacy of the object before me are held in view by the immediacy of my seeing hearing, by the immediate certainty of the I. This means that the object I take myself to be certain of is itself subtly transformed. It is no longer merely this, here, now, but what I mean by this, what I know to be immediately present before me. Hegel notes, however, that in this relationship, sense certainty experiences the same dialectical acting upon itself as in the previous one. The problem, put simply, is this. If all I am aware of is what I mean by this, I do not actually have anything specific in mind, for another I is equally conscious of what I mean by this. What I mean by this is thus just as vague and indeterminate as this here now. It remains beyond me, what other eyes are certain of, and indeed what I myself am certain of, at other times and in other places. And so when I am myself another than I am, then I, the one, am now, by thinking of what I am immediately certain of, I think I have in mind something utterly specific to me. But the truth is that when I say I, this singular I say in general all eyes. Everyone is what I say, everyone is I, this singular I. Like this, here and now, therefore, the unspecified I proves to be an abstract, indeterminate universal. The second experience thus shows sense certainty that it is no more certain of something specific when it takes its object to be what I am, what I mean by this, than when it takes its object to be simply this. Sense certainty thus comes to know by experience that its essence is neither in the object nor in the I. Okay, so I will leave that now. We'll come back and read over that again and again to reflect on it. But basically, we get thisness in sense certainty that does not focus on differentiation. And then out of this, we realize in the experience of sense certainty, as we have seen, the object of this certainty comes to diverge from what it is initially taken to be. Hegel notes we can compare the former with the latter. Okay. Till next time, take care.